Yumi Sato, medical examiner. Yumi! Sarah. Dr. Sato, we're very grateful for your work sorting through the large number of reports related to this case. Phew, yeah. 5 bodies, all high priority. Had my head underwater for a good while there. We'd prefer not to tax you with repeating every grisly detail. But if you would you please walk the court through the time of death of each victim and the manner in which they were determined? Right. From the top. Ankur Tan, aka Tanks, had a mishmash of street legal and chop shop mods along his forearms. None of them were particularly up to date, but they were all working and they did monitor his heart rate. Tanks' heart stopped at 9:44 p.m. The cause of death was... The slug had a hollow design, intended to shatter inside the target. There is no mistaking that he was killed by his own gun, the Mag US, from a distance of 1 to 2 meters. Next up is Sungmin Trey Trench. He also had relatively low-end mods installed, and they show his heart stopping at 9:45 p.m. He died from exsanguination, blood loss resulting from a laceration across his neck by a sharp metal blade. That wasn't the only injury his body sustained, though, was it? No, it was not. Posthumously, his skull was... Heavens, Miller Smiles received a puncture wound straight through his jugular vein. Then the blade was withdrawn, exacerbating blood loss, and he was likely unconscious within seconds of falling to the ground. Miller had mods, but had evidently gone to great lengths to remove all monitoring tech from them. And he was not found with any electronics on his person. Using purely medical means, I narrowed his time of death down to a window of 10 minutes between 9:40 and 9:50 p.m. Even though I killed him third and he was the second to die. That brings us to Creek. Yes, like Tanks, Lakers Creek Kristoff was shot once with a hollow slug from a distance of 1 to 2 meters. However, the slug penetrated just beneath their solar plexus and failed to completely shatter when it impacted a low-end spinal brace mod. As a result, Creek didn't die immediately. It is my medical opinion that Creek would have slowly bled out over the course of about 5 minutes. Their mod did not have biomonitoring capabilities. So, like with Miller, I've done what I can to narrow down the time of death to a 10-minute window between 9:40 and 9:50 p.m. So he was barely modded, and he stayed conscious that whole time anyway. But we do have one other context clue to work with. This datapad was found very close to Creek's body, and technicians confirmed that it requires Creek's fingerprints for most functions. That means it's unlikely that anyone else would have been able to manipulate it. And we found the last action taken on it was an attempted dark card transaction that failed at 9:44 p.m. What could cause a dark card transaction to fail? Either they hit cancel or the card itself was jostled, interrupting the scan. As if the datapad was suddenly dropped. Speculation? How much qualification does one need to understand that card readers can be finicky, Your Honor? True enough. Chip, swipe, pin, tap. Just let me buy the damn balloon animal, you clown! So, taking that digital evidence into account, Creek must have been shot almost at the exact same time as Tanks. Thank you. There's one more body you examined for this case, yes? Officer Tariq Chopin. I didn't need to determine his time of death. As a patrol officer, he had a standard suite of police-issued biomonitors. So we know that Officer Chopin's heart stopped at 10:14:04 p.m., triggering an automatic 10999 alert. Officer down. Lighting up that crime scene like a firecracker and ensuring every cop in the city would come running, royally pissed and safety's off. Chopin was impaled through his back by a long, thin blade. It severed his aorta, and as a result, he died instantly. To summarize, then, we can conclude the tank's gun was taken from him before 9:44 p.m. He and Creek were then shot with it. Their attacker, out of ammunition, took up a sword and stabbed Miller in the throat, before slicing into Trey's neck. This individual then proceeded to posthumously crush Trey's skull by striking it so hard that they shattered a baseball bat, as Creek bled to death on the other side of the room. Finally, when Officer Chopin entered the scene, they stabbed him in the back, before finally being apprehended by Officer Rogers. That's all correct as far as you understand it. So now Rockford's put together a timeline. It's probably helpful for the jury, putting it all in chronological order. But have we actually learned anything new about the culprit's actions? We have. Emma brought her on the stand to establish the culprit's... sought as established where in the room the killings had to have started. Correct. Because Creek and Tanks died first, and they were both shot down from within 1 to 2 meters. We know that the culprit must have started taking action right by the desk, and not by the door to the holding room. Indeed. So the likelihood that my client broke out from there is not very high at all. Yes? An abundance of DNA evidence establishes that the defendant was indeed held in the other room, but clearly he didn't remain there. His captors must have taken him out to question him in the main room, and dragged him in front of the desk, where Tanks' gun would be within reach. You're the one who's reaching. You have evidence to the contrary? A better explanation for how he got out of where he was being held? Can't exactly propose that the real killer set him free as a scapegoat. The forensics are clear. My client was gagged and bound into that room. Was, but clearly they had to cut him loose to question him. A mistake that ended up costing them their lives. Do you think that's true, Sosuke? I'm not positive, of course, but my body is telling me that I was held in that room from the time I woke up until I got myself free. Emma's theory about the Blue Bloods being dumb enough to let Sosuke near a gun isn't perfect, but it's still a theory. I don't have jack shit to counter with because not even Sosuke knows how I let him out. If the defense has no objections, then they'll just have to take this L and meekly move on to their cross-examination. Adonai, that made you sound very feeble. You developed the habit of only using we when I'm winning. Fix it. That made us sound very feeble? Why do I have to get roped in? Emma's already established a timeline and an order of events. I could pick at the details, but she's close enough to the truth already. I know the truth firsthand about every death except Chopin. In his case, Emma and I are on even footing. So what's my advantage? What do I know that everyone else is mistaken about? Right, the murder weapons. Everyone thinks Miller was stabbed in the neck by the katana. I'm the only one who knows my knife was there. There's got to be a way I can use that information to my advantage here, without revealing that I have it, or how I got it. I'm walking a razor's edge here. At least it's thematically appropriate. The defense is ready to begin our cross-examination, Your Honor. Dr. Sato, you were asked to examine all 5 bodies. Did you visit the crime scene? I did not. Have not. Photos and other ARCS data were provided to me to aid in my examination. Surely the defense isn't objecting to a little virtual work? Of course not. After all, had anything been added or removed from the crime scene, the ARCS would show it. There's no fooling it once it's been set up. 2 individuals suffered gunshot wounds. You found that both matched the MAG US firearm that's been entered into evidence? I did. Shrapnel is by nature unpredictable, but the scale of destruction does make it pretty hard to mistake for anything else. Didn't exactly learn anything new there. Victims Trey and Miller were both attacked with a blade. Exactly how fast did they die? Trey had his throat slashed, and blood found on his hands suggests that he had time to reach up to his neck in response. But he would have quickly stumbled back and collapsed onto the floor, dead. Miller wouldn't have lost much blood at the moment his neck was punctured. For that kind of wound, the weapon acts as a stopper. once that stopper was removed, he would have lost consciousness in mere seconds. And while the blade was still on his neck, if it was there for more than a second, he too would have reflexively reached up, presumably to try and grab the blade. Is there any evidence that he tried to grab the razor-sharp katana lodged into his neck? He had his own blood on his right hand, but there were no cuts on it, because he grabbed the knife's handle, not a sword's edge. So it stands to reason that the blade was withdrawn very quickly. By the time his hands reached up to his neck, it must have been gone. One of many small inconsistencies with this katana theory I can shine a light on. Will that be enough? Stabbing Miller's neck so precisely and so fast, that would be quite the feat of swordsmanship. Stating a conclusion, Your Honor. Comments withdrawn, quick as a blade. Have you ever seen a stab wound like the one that killed Miller, inflicted by a long blade, and wielded in one hand by a man experiencing heavy blood loss? No, I can't say that I have. Now, whether that maneuver is impressive or improbable, well, I'm a doctor, not a fencer. Sosuke doesn't own a rapier. Did you find that the stab wound on Miller's neck fit the sword that the police removed? Approximately. That doesn't sound conclusive. The entry wound is slightly smaller than I would expect for such a precise stab. The sword hand must have barely trembled, but it's within tolerable ranges. Furthermore, DNA on the tip of the sword is a match for Miller. Damn it, just because I happened to drag it across where his blood had dripped. And of course, there isn't any other implement on the scene that fits the wound better. No, of course there isn't. Could you speak a bit more about the manner of Officer Chopin's death? Well, to reiterate, his body was found with a katana stuck through his back, and it punctured his heart, killing him. There was massive blood loss at the scene, at least in part because the wound in question was agitated, I suppose I'd say. What do you mean by agitated? Honestly, as though after impalement, the blade was moved around inside the wound, as if it had become stuck and someone was struggling to remove it. London mentioned that Sato found this wound odd, but to hear her specifically say that the blade had become stuck, that's interesting. Thank you, Dr. Sato. I think I can speak for us all when I say I found that very enlightening. Dr. Sato, you just testified that Officer Chopin was impaled from behind. Did this occur on the spot where his body was found? Yes, it did. The body shows no signs of being moved. I'm curious, then. What was there for the sword to get stuck on? Huh? Well, if Chopin was in the center of the room, standing upright, he wouldn't have gotten caught in the air, right? Bone, perhaps? Surely you examined the wound inside and out. Did you see marks on his ribcage where the blade had caught? No, I didn't. Then it stands to reason that the blade didn't get caught on anything inside Mr. Chopin. It got caught on the floor. Pardon? You need to take greater advantage of the arcs, Counselor Morgan. Learn to flip things on their head. Entire rooms, if need be. If you had, you'd see that there's a clear indentation in the floor that lines up perfectly with Mr. Chopin's wound. How did you think this tip of the sword got chipped? You're saying the sword got stuck in the floor? That's what the facts are saying. Do you disagree? I don't necessarily disagree, no. If Chopin was impaled and fell face first, it makes perfect sense for the sword to get caught in the floor as he collapsed on top of it. So, we can conclude that after being impaled, Chopin fell over with the sword still on his torso, driving the sword to the ground. Then his attacker aggravated the wound by trying to retrieve the sword from his corpse. Does that sound right? What? Are you asking me? Sort of, asking the room, I guess. Well, I believe I can answer. What you're describing makes sense, Dr. Sato, but only up until we consider again the fingerprints on the sword handle. If my client really did impale Tariq Chopin and get his sword stuck doing so, Why would he try to retrieve it with only one hand? Because he had to retrieve it with one hand. You yourself already elucidated that the defendant's left hand was broken when he destroyed the elevator panel in Crane Tower. His left hand was too damaged for him to even grip a sword. That doesn't square with this piece of evidence. The Maguats? How could my client's left hand be too damaged to grip his sword, and yet also capable of gripping the Maguats? That oddity is hardly impossible to explain. We've already determined that the Maguas was fired twice before the sword was used at all. Firing such a weapon with a broken hand surely rendered his left useless. It is difficult to wield a sword with a damaged hand, isn't it, Sosuke? Historically, even the loss of a pinky on your non-dominant hand was considered enough to render you relatively defenseless. Is that why Yakuza would offer to cut off fingers as a recompense for offenses? That's right, sir. In fact, cut the chatter and save the history lesson. He had to pull the sword loose with one hand because his left was useless. Looking at all the forensics pulled from the katana, that's... Your Honor, the people claim that my client had to use one hand to retrieve the sword because his other hand was disabled. But does the evidence actually suggest that? What do you mean? Forensics performed on the katana found my client's right hand fingerprints on the handle. But what grip are the prints a match for? Let me just give it a quick think here as I meticulously analyze the position of each finger. A normal grip. The grip is normal. Do you mean to say that the thumb is facing towards the blade, Your Honor? Well, yeah, but isn't it easier to just say he held it like normal? If my client only held the sword with his right hand normally, Your Honor, that would mean he held the handle like that even as he tried to jostle the blade free from the floor it was impaled in. Which is far from impossible. But if, Your Honor, the court has questions about exactly how the defendant was positioned when he was found standing above Officer Chopin's corpse, I believe the people's next witness will be able to answer all of them. That can only mean it's finally time to face off the arresting officer. Chopin's partner. Very well. Then let us summon to the stand. No name not found. What? What? Is that a family or given name? What? Yeah, got one big ol' error right here, and it's a classic. Witness not found, literally. He ain't here. What? He's had hours to get here. What the hell could he possibly be? Our star witness is a no-show. Is this good news or bad news? Like hitting the jackpot on the world's sketchiest slot machine. Feels good, but you get the feeling that the staff is going to make you pay for it. That idiotic. Pay for it when? Fine. I'll finish it myself. Right about now. Perhaps it's for the best then, Your Honor. We can save the court the trouble by wrapping up things here and now. The facts are simple, and the defense has failed to refute them. Thus the people call for summary judgment. Already, the defendant is the only one with his prints on the gun. He is the only one with his prints on the katana. His own employer testified to this court that he was attacked and captured by 4 of the 5 victims. He was found and arrested standing over the body of a dead cop, before 2 more officers arrived and secured the scene. That must be Ray's in London she's referring to. As the only living person left at the scene of the crime, there was no one else who could have committed these murders. She's on a tear, and I'd be lying if I said it wasn't entertaining. But it's only because she's on tilt. She was thrown off by her witness flakiness caused her to overstep. She just fired off a lot of claims in quick succession. Which is the weakest one? Where do I counterattack? She just claimed that Sosuke is the only one who could have committed these murders. She can't possibly prove that. She can't prove that there wasn't anyone else there that night because I actually was. And unlike her, I can prove the possibility of another party being present without having to reveal their identity. The people are mistaken, Your Honor. My client wasn't the only other person there that night. And there's evidence to show it. What is that? The dark card found lodged in the Creek's datapad? That's right. The perfect payment option when neither you nor the businesses you frequent like attaching names to faces. We've already discussed that within moments of Creek's death, a transaction was being attempted on his datapad. A transaction made using the dark card, but whatever for. Perhaps some of the handful of illicit substances that were found at the scene of the crime. Crap, yeah, almost forgot. These guys were drug dealers. And drug dealers get customers, Your Honor. Customers that can be very temperamental when things go south. Are you trying to suggest these killings were the result of a drug deal gone wrong? I mean, they sort of were. A drug deal made in person at a blue blood stronghold? Dark cards require a passkey and a fingerprint. The card would be useless if its owner wasn't physically present for the transaction. A transaction that might be abruptly cancelled if tensions boiled over. A potential buyer would likely have been across the desk from Creek. The same spot in the room that we've established that the killer must have started their rampage. Cute idea, counselor, but there's no meat to it. We know that Creek was using that datapad before he died, and we know that the dark card was processing the transaction at the time. But for some reason, you've made the assumption that he was selling, when the simplest explanation is that he was buying, using the dark card that he owned. The dark card belonged to Creek. How will you respond? I don't need to respond with evidence. I just need to point out the flawed evidence she's constructed her argument upon. Characterization, Your Honor. The people are claiming that the dark card in the evidence record belonged to the victim, Creek, despite the fact that it has no fingerprints on it either. What? If that dark card had belonged to Creek, he would have had to insert it into the datapad with his teeth. Yuck. So who did the dark card belong to? Perhaps a customer who didn't like his prices. A disgruntled customer could have wiped their prints off the card to hide the fact they were ever there. That's absurd. If a customer brought that dark card with them to the crime scene, why the hell wouldn't they take it with them when they left? It was stuck in the datapad. They could have pulled a little harder. They could have taken the datapad with them. Who would leave behind something that valuable? The card is worthless to everyone but its owner, to whom it could be priceless. Why would they choose to leave it behind? The answer to that is simple, if I'm honest. We're discussing the possibility of a deal gone south. What could cause that in the first place? Aggressive negotiating tactics? Or a customer who couldn't pay? What are you? This customer could afford a dark card. And yet, they couldn't pay. Hold on. You're trying to say that all these deaths, all this carnage, you think it's all because their card got declined? Hard to live down that kind of faux pas. Murdering 4 or 5 people in order to skip paying your bill is pretty aggressive, but if you need your fix... Was there any indication the contraband was taken from the scene of the crime? Your Honor, that is difficult to say. Without knowing their inventory before the crime occurred, we cannot rule out the possibility. That was a little lackluster of a pushback. Is she really that thrown off by this witness playing hooky? Well, I hate to do this because I love spending time with you all, and having a physical body, and being ensouled. But it does seem like I have to declare a recess while we wait. Perfectly reasonable, Your Honor. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. What? Court is now in recess.